I'm part of this family. It's supposed to be healthy. It's supposed to be safe. There's supposed to be attuned caregivers, but guess what? They're not. Okay, so I need to lose a little bit of myself in order to continue belonging.
The amygdala is letting you know that this is not right. Yet everything around you is telling you that this is love.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the OWL podcast. We're your hosts, Ethiopia and Magnolia. And yeah, hope you're enjoying our podcast so far. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about a bunch of different things, but really, it's going to be focusing on neuroscience and affectivity and attachment. Ethiopia, you just started reading a book. What book is that and what's it about? Why is it relevant?
So I'm reading this book, The Neuroscience of Human Relationships, and there's the person's name there.
Cozzolino, heard a lot about him, yeah.
And so attachment and the developing social brain. And shout out to the library. I got this at the library for $3 to have and to hold from this day until I'm done with it. Um, so yeah, like as I was like flipping through the book before I purchased it, I was thinking like, yeah, going more in depth about the neuroscience of how we engage in relationships is pretty important for the work that we do, right? Because there are things that are happening. Everything is neuroscience. Everything. And so, what is it that, how are we working? Like, what is the biology behind um how we engage in relationships? And I'll have to note at the end, this is the part that I actually really love too. At the very end of the book, and remember, y'all, I just started reading it. At the end of the book, it talks about he talks about consciousness. And so for me, it's like, all right, now we're getting back into philosophy, right? Because the whole idea of consciousness is something that can be discussed and discussed and discussed and discussed again. And I think it's a very important part of that because, right, as long as your heart is beating, you're alive. You're not dead until your heart stops. You can be brain dead though. And so there's this thing around, is there still consciousness when the brain is dead? It's like it's just consciousness is such a huge, huge topic for me. And I dare say, I mean, that is something, regardless of how much I've learned around it, it's still something that is so complex. And the more I learn, the more I'm like, the more I learn, the more I'm like, I don't know. I just, I just don't know.
I don't
Um,
know, and
and,
I don't know what I don't know.
yeah, and that part, that place feels really good for me. No, because it's like, you learn things about after people die, what happens, and sometimes like they'll say, oh, these are just body reactions to a person that died that is crying, that tears are being expressed, or these different things. And it's just like, yeah, it's just there's so much we don't know, that I feel good not knowing. Like I'm like, I don't, the more I learn about consciousness, the more I'm like, I don't know. And it's something that we experience. So yeah, this book has opened up some stuff for me, packed full of diagrams, um, and just really the different things that the brain does and how we're interacting with each other, the two hemispheres, what their functions are. It's pretty interesting. And so we decided we're going to talk about that today. And I'm curious, Magnolia, is there anything you want to share around that?
Really, what comes to mind is that one of the basic things that I learned in undergrad when I was a psych major was that things that wire together fire together, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about. But what that means essentially is that the brain is a complex organism or an organ, organ and organism, I don't know. It's a complex organ and it has a lot of different connections. And then different structures within the brain itself connect to different things, but there are a lot of different overlaps between the different parts of the brain. There's different parts that are like the hemispheres, and then we have the lobes, and then we have like a bunch of other little structures within the brain. And yeah, there's just a bunch of overlap between what it all means, what it all does. So I think Ethiopia, if you can talk a little bit about the amygdala, some stuff that you're learning about that, and especially in terms of relationships and attachment.
Yeah, so um in the book, I can't find the actual diagram now. Yet the amygdala is the key component to how everything is functioning because the diagram has the amygdala in the center and then everything else, every other function of every other part of the brain in relationship to relationships is tied to the amygdala, right? And that's when I shared that piece with you, I was just like, I was like, yeah, no wonder why there's like loneliness epidemics and or that there is a loneliness epidemic and that folks find it hard to connect with each other because the amygdala is also the place where the trauma, the memory of the trauma is stored. And so not growing up in safety, right? Bringing it back to the attachment in a way that is meaningful, because we explored, the pros and cons of just relying on that. Um, a child that is not raised in a safe place, their amygdala is shaped to not like looking at things as not being safe, looking at relationships as not being safe. And then if we want to even bring it back, because what we also know is that the memories, what happened to my mother, what happened to my grandmother, those things were really important and how those had an effect on my amygdala, right? The intergenerational stuff, those traumas that we have carried through generation and generation, aka the generational curse. Um, so yeah, I was like, wow, like just seeing it so plain like that, I was just like, oh, this makes so much sense that there's so much, trepidation around engaging fully, authentically in relationships. And that's just based off of like the amygdala shaped through that trauma. That it doesn't even bring into the societal aspects of how you're supposed to show up in relationships.
Yeah. And if the amygdala, okay, so I'll backtrack a little bit. The amygdala is an almond-shaped structure and is pretty much, as far as I understand, the size of an almond also. And there's this book called The Body Keeps a Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who's a psychiatrist. And that's what we call the trauma Bible in mental health and in trauma work. And in there, he talks a lot about the amygdala. The amygdala, as he describes it, is a watchtower. So essentially, its job is to alert you and to alarm you. Hey, danger. And then
Mm.
you can explore it and be like, okay, no, there's no danger. Or yeah, there is danger. And then it propels your body to act, basically. It causes a cascade of hormones and things like that, and then it causes it to act. So I think it's really fascinating that the book is saying that the amygdala is also associated with relationships because yes, I think on top of the fact of like somebody having a bunch of childhood trauma, I just like I'm curious. Obviously, I don't have the answer, but and maybe the answer's in the book, maybe it isn't. But like, why is the watchtower also associated with relationships? Like, I wonder if that could be because evolutionarily speaking, people have been so harmful to one another. I'm just curious. But either way, I guess it is important to practice that discernment and it could play a role in like discerning like, okay, these people are hurtful, these people are harmful, that kind of thing. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I was just like it just made me think of like when was the shift? Because um what we know is that in different cultures there wasn't that level of trauma from childhood. It just didn't exist. The traumas were more like things could happen to me um that could hurt me severely, yet it being about another person, it wasn't so much that. And I found I found the diagram. I'm like, oh, I found a diagram. I was like, this is well, you probably can't see it. I may just like attach it somehow. We can figure it out. But what it says is that the amygdala connections to the primary structures of the social brain, and it's showing how the amygdala is connected to the social brain. Everything, the primary structures of the social brain, the amygdala is connected to. So in that way, it does make sense. However, now think about this. Think about the absolute mindfuck you experience when the harm is coming from the person that is supposed to love you. Right now, the harm is coming from the person that not only like, and I'm saying like whether it be the parents, right, the family. These ideas are reinforced socially through our socialization, right? That parents have unconditional love for their children. Yet, what does that do now that you have that societal narrative going on that you're loved unconditionally by your parents and they are harming you? So that lack, it makes me just really curious on like, right? Because you're in fight, flight, or freeze. You know that it's not safe. However, now, okay, now the cognitive distortions must come in, right? Cognitive distortion, AKA lie, right? The cognitive distortion, the thought distortion has to come in to make sense of what is happening. It doesn't make sense. The amygdala is letting you know that this is not right. Yet, everything around you is telling you that this is love.
Yeah, definitely. I just got out of this training yesterday, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the trainer. The
Girl.
trainer is a psychologist, and I respect him a lot, and I really love his work. I love the trainings that he's gone to. He's mentored me himself as I was getting certified. His name is Dr. Kenneth M. Adams. Again, PhD in psychology. And there's two books that relate to the topic I'm about to cover a little bit. And so one is called Silently Seduced. That's written by him. And that's a book on enmeshment. And then there's this other one called When He's Married to Mom. How to help mother enmeshed men open their hearts to true love and commitment. So he has professional and personal experience, and he talks a little bit about it in the books. And in this training, he was talking a little bit about how he posits, right, that there are four prongs of trauma. There's abuse, abandonment, and neglect, which we're familiar with totally. And then he posits that there's a fourth prong of childhood trauma, which is enmeshment. And so he considers enmeshment different from what it's typically described as in the workbooks of like, oh, very lackadaisical. Yes, yes, yes. It's just something that happens in family, you know? He sees it as something more serious. He really sees it as a developmental trauma. And with it being a developmental trauma, he's saying that the brain wires a certain way and the limbic system is activated in a certain way, and that's why it's so deeply entrenched and it can be so hard to break out of enmeshment. He says that when you're working with enmeshment as a therapist or even as a client, like you should very much expect to have a lot of slips just because it is so difficult to really get to the root of it. And he talks a little bit about the consequences of enmeshment. And he says that it really sabotages the pleasure system because something happens where the person has to self-sacrifice due to the greater good. I'm part of this family. It's supposed to be healthy. It's supposed to be safe. They're supposed to be attuned caregivers, but guess what? They're not. Okay, so I need to lose a little bit of myself in order to continue belonging. And on that, I'm going to tack on a side note to say that like it makes sense, right? That our complex, so much complexity that we have, especially around socialization within our brains, because our societal structures are very complex too. And I think they're less complex in some ways now than they were historically when we had more of a tribal aspect to our lives and we were way more in community and everybody had a different role and everybody contributed to the system versus we kind of can operate as islands in a lot of ways now. But anyhow, coming back to the enmeshment, he talks a lot about how an enmeshed family system can actually really impact sexual desires, sexual development, and then also we tend to see a lot of challenges with eating because with eating and with sex, it is a form of acting out of like, okay, well, you can take all these other things away from me. You can take parts of me away from me and stuff like that. You could take away myself, but I still have the choice to, if I really want to escape. I can still have the pleasure of binging or restricting with food. Or I can binge or restrict with sex, right? And these are things that are readily accessible to me, maybe similarly to like substances, but these are more accessible because wherever I am, like technically I could have sex with people, right? Or if I'm gonna eat, food's gonna be everywhere where I go. Um, so yeah, lots of different changes there. And it just basically where there's a trigger, there's just like this stress response that happens because it's wired in the trauma. And there's like the compulsory behaviors of I need to save people, I need to rescue other people, I need to behave in a certain way. You start to see the fight, flight, freeze, and the other F responses. So that's what's coming to mind right now.
Yeah, I'm like, I love that fourth pillar of enmeshment because that is absolute confusion. And I honestly, when I think about it, I'm like, it's it's pretty, I don't want to say typical. I think enmeshment is normalized as well, right? Like my children have autonomy that I didn't have because I've been intentional about it. And and like this ownership of the child that's in our culture, it lends itself to enmeshment. I was actually looking for a good definition of enmeshment um for folks who may not know. Yet, this thing about the the emotional like the child is becomes responsible for the adult's emotions.
Yeah, and essentially enmeshment is like becoming engulfed by a person, a caregiver, or multiple caregivers, or the family system. So there's no you, Ethiopia. You just are one with us, basically, kind of thing. And there's different forms of enmeshment. So there's parentification, which is like you're made to be a parent, right? Which we've covered a little bit. There's the chosen child, which the you can look a little bit further into like just toxic family systems or addictive family systems. The chosen child is a form. You're it. Ethiopia, you're responsible for everything in the family and the family legacy, and we're putting an extension of ourselves in you, and you're just it's a lot of pressure, right? So looking at the child in that way, but you see how there's a bit of objectification in the parentification, there's objectification in the chosen child. Then there's the emotional incest component of things. That's another one where it's like, okay, well, me as a parent, I rely way too much on you to meet my emotional needs rather than me as a parent being an adult who's fully developed or mostly fully developed, taking care of you and your needs. And then there's covert incest, which is the opposite of overt, right? Overt being like sexual, yes.
Hmm.
And then covert being like more of a pseudo spouse type of thing. So I think spousification would definitely fall under that. Or just feeling a little bit weird, like my parents a little bit too close to me, or they pay a little bit too much attention to me. Those kinds of vibes might fall under the covert incest. And then there's just like straight enmeshment. So yeah, it just basically objectifies a child and it forces a child to give of themselves more than they should, more than they're developmentally ready for. So then because it requires more, it taxes the system and then it causes deficiencies basically.
Hmm. And I just want to add that with um parentification, did I say that right? Um, that there's also infantilization.
Yeah, definitely.
One always they reside together because when the child becomes the parent, then the parent becomes the child,
That's right.
right? This is why the whole thing around, carrying the emotional load for the adult. And these things show up in ways like that you may not even realize that it is what it is, but if you have to tiptoe around the parent to make sure that they're okay, you can't be honest, you don't want to upset them, you're carrying the emotional load for the parent. And in that way, right? I mean, and I don't even know how much that happens for children that, the parents are tiptoeing around and saying, hey, we want to make sure that we don't make you cry. I mean, I'm sure it must happen somehow, yet, you know, usually with children, it's like, yo, like whatever you're feeling is not as important as what needs to happen right now. So that's another aspect of it that I think is important to acknowledge is that if the child is holding the emotional load of the adult, right, then the adult is really in this place of being the child. And in that way,
Absolutely.
there can be compassion and grace. We can consider that like why is the parent showing up in that way?
Absolutely. And then that's a whole other layer, right? Because if the parent is showing up in that way, then essentially it's like, hey, my needs aren't met, so let me hold on to your energy and get extra energy from you to help me survive, kind of thing. But then again, that's going to point to a deficiency within the parent of their needs aren't met. So ultimately, the parent is responsible, though. We'll get into the healthy stuff, but like going back a little bit to like objectification. What is objectification? That's like I see you as an object. I see you as an object and you serve only one purpose or a set of purposes, and that's it. I don't see you as a whole person with your own feelings, and you can have good days and you can have bad days and all these other things. You're an object, you serve this one function, right? And then with this enmeshment system, it's like it it impacts the way that our emotions are wired, the way that our thinking is wired, and then the thinking reinforces itself through the way that it's wired, right? I'm not good enough. I don't deserve to have needs. I need to serve other people, those kinds of things. And we didn't talk about it as much because like the training had a lot of information, but to me, honestly, I started to discover enmeshment sometime between the ages of like 8 and 10 years old. I just would notice that there were some kids that were really reserved, and I was good at feeling out energy anyway. So it's like, and probably attuning too much to people. And I had my own levels of enmeshment too that I grew up with, right? That I was forced to step into. But it's like, for example, Ethiopia, if I was like, hey, do you want to come play soccer with us? And then it's like it was very obvious. Your face would light up. You'd be so happy. You'd be laughing, excited, smiling. But then you'd shut down. There was this disconnect, and then you'd push it away and be like, "No, I can't." Right? And I think a lot of that holding back is one of the signs that I tend to see in people, and an element of self-betrayal or what's that word? Like when you withhold things from yourself. I keep forgetting. Ah. I don't know, when you withhold things from yourself, right? Yeah. So just withholding things from yourself, that's a big thing because then there are parts that say, well, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. Again, it's the same thing. I don't deserve good things. I need to serve other people, right? And it just so lives in the body that it's really sad because we end up losing a lot of ourselves, a lot of our lives, a lot of the pleasure that we can get from life. And then it's like, well, if I don't have that, if I don't have a sense of self, then what purpose do I have? You can see how that could tie into like suicidality, a lack of purpose, a lack of joy. And if I don't know who I am and I can't connect with myself because I shouldn't, because I don't know how, because no one ever connected with me, because I'm not worthy of being connected to, because I'm afraid of what I'm going to find, because there's nothing there to find. It gets really intricate. And if I can't connect to myself, then I can't connect to other people. If I can't love myself, I can't love other people. And no, that's not the sole answer. No, it isn't that simple. At the same time, that's why Dr. Adams posits that like if you're enmeshed, grew up in an enmeshed family system, you haven't worked on it yet, there is no capacity to love. And that's really what it boils down to, right? And then that's when I think you start to see a lot of problems in dating of like, oh yeah, hey, I'm so exciting and I'm so fun and let's get together and let's date and let's be in a relationship and let's maybe get married or not, right? And but it's only a facade and it's only a shell. That's it's a performance. It's performative. And I think that's really tricky because then as you can see, right? I think with eating disorders, we'll get into sex addiction here in a minute, but with eating disorders, what happens is you tend to see that cycle. And I really like this lens because I start to see this in people in every kind of behavior. There's the binging and then there's the restricting. So from the training that I went to in that, it's like, are you more of a binging person or are you more of a restrictive person? Right? Oh, I restrict my money, I count my calories, I budget, I make sure everything's in order and that kind of thing, then you're tending more toward restriction. And then if you're like excited and you're like, hey, let me treat everybody and let's go out to eat and like I'll pay and this and that, right? Or let me buy this, let me buy this, let me buy this, then you're tending more toward binging. So you can translate that to really any behavior, right? You could be measured more in the middle, but it is a continuum. And so then if we look at sex addiction, it's like, well, I don't have a sense of self or any of these things, and I have a lot of deficiencies in my upbringing and things like that. And these are explanations, not excuses, but it's like the way one of my other mentors said, it's like a lot of sex addiction can develop because it's like, yeah, I don't have a sense of self and things like that, but I'm just nice. I'm very nice. I'm a nice guy. Yeah. And so I'm going to present really nicely because, again, I'm only loved for what I have to offer other people. And then I have to keep a lot of secrets because I'm not allowed to have my wants. I'm not allowed to have my own needs. Right. And then the secrecy builds upon itself. And then that causes a lot of shame. And it's just really, really intricate. Yeah, I know shame's a big thing for you. What do you have to share on that?
Yeah, I was like, as soon as you get to the shame, now you're in the cycle because shame is the belief, usually untrue. It's a belief that's going to create further actions, and that's how you get that, and it's like getting out of that loop, getting out of that cycle is that's the work from my point of view. It's like, how do I not identify with that? And then if like bringing it back to the enmeshment piece, the shame that you feel if you cannot show up for the parent in the ways that you've been trained to show up for the parent, right? I have to do this. I have to be there. I have to be the one. And I've witnessed this so much in my life beyond in the clinical sense, like watching, like you said, like the people who the young friends who are like, I can't do that. I have this responsibility that I have to do. And this is the other piece, right? And I said this in training with Dr. Adams. It's like enmeshment is often attributed to mother, and with Dr. Adams, like I haven't really seen much outside of the mother, much discussion outside of enmeshment with the mother. You did a training with him. Was there more about the father in the training?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I did a training yesterday on it, and we talked about kind of mother-daughter, mother-son, father-daughter, father-son. Yeah, kind of
Okay,
the whole
well
gamut.
that's good to know. Because I was thinking about um the single mother, right? And that level of responsibility that if there's more than one child, like I know someone that had to, they always had their younger sibling with them because the mom needed that support so she could go to work. And like just kind of thinking about or considering how even societal structures add to the opportunity for enmeshment. I don't have money. uh Dad is gone or whatever, like, and in my case, like, my partner died, yet that's not the case for everybody. People, the father is not there, so now the mother has the responsibility of raising children with little to no support sometimes, which is it's a prime opportunity for enmeshment to happen. I'm curious about what the literature looks like for enmeshment, if more of the literature is based in two parent households, because like how do you then tease out um the responsibility of the child when the parent has to rely on the child for support because the other parent is no longer there.
That's actually one of the things that is covered in that training as well. Most of the clients that we tend to have that have sex addiction tend to be men. Yes. Doesn't mean that women don't have it, doesn't mean non-binary people don't have it, but most of them tend to be men. Because again, as we keep saying, men tend to have a huge lack of support in development and then in society as well, right? So, in terms of emotional support, anyway. So, yeah, the stereotypical thing is like the dad is a sex addict or an alcoholic or something like that, or a workaholic, and he's just like pretty absent from the family. So then the mom and the son develop a really close relationship because, like, I guess there's a lot of psychic energy, right? So it's like the energy has to go somewhere. So where the energy would typically be between a husband and wife, say, and they would have a really strong connection and emotional intimacy and all these things, they don't. There's some kind of disconnect there. So then what happens is the mom ends up putting the psychic energy on the, let's put it in the situation, the son. The son knows too much, they're too close with the mom, and then also the lack of the role model with the dad. It just causes a slew of challenges, really, right? And unless they're corrected or adapted, then yeah, it can lead to enmeshment. I think really what it comes down to is like boundaries, but it comes down to like the boundaries from the parents. If the parents aren't very self-aware, haven't worked through their trauma, don't know what a boundary is, don't know how to set it, feel really guilty themselves because they themselves were enmeshed as well, they're going to be transferring this type of energy and these patterns into the children. So then the children are going to have it the same way, if not worse. And so that's why a lot of people will say, they're like, okay, I think you're right. With sex addiction, yes, absolutely is a shame, right? And with a lot of addictions, it's a shame. With enmeshment, it's guilt because it is sometimes covert. So like it's not super obvious, but other times it's like, well, Ethiopia, I did this for you, so you have to do this for me. Right. And then guilt, 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 guilt from a person. The family system really reinforces that guilt and things like that. And then the person feels like, well, I have to comply in order to survive. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I
Uh,
mean,
yeah, I appreciate you giving us more there.
of course.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, yo, man, it's such an important thing. I was just thinking about like how much intention I've put into my parenting. And like I might have shared this story about like reading bell hooks. Did I share that story yet? Reading bell hooks, all about love, and asking my children the question that she said, if you ask children this, this is how they'll respond.
I
And
can't
my
remember if we
children,
recorded that. What was that question?
oh, so in the book, All About Love by Bell Hooks, All About Love, New Visions, Bell Hooks says that, well, she's talking about love and how there's confusion about what love actually is. And we use the term a lot, yet what we're taught is love is actually care and affection, which has its own term, which is called cathect, cathect, cathect. And she said, if you ask a child, you know, if you ask a child, like, hey, do you think I love you? That oftentimes they'll go to things that fall under cathect, care and affection. So I asked my son first. I'm laughing because it became a big thing. I'm glad I did it. I asked my son first. I was like, "Do you think I love you?" And he was like, "Yeah, of course you love me." He came in and started giving me a hug and everything, and I'm feeling all good. I was like, "Well, how do you know?" And he was like, "Well, you make us really yummy meals. You make sure that we have everything that we need. You give us hugs and kisses and these kinds of things. And, you make sure I have really good birthdays and stuff like that." And I'm like, "Yes, that's true." Um, and I said, "Do you think I respect you?" No, no. I said, "Do you think I recognize you?" Because I went in order of what Bell Hooks said. I said, "Do you think I recognize you?" He's like, "Recognize me? Nah, you don't recognize me. You don't recognize me." And I was like, mm. He's like, "Yeah." And he gave his reason. And I said, "Okay." And then I said, "Do you think I respect you?" And he was like, "You don't recognize me, so how can you respect me?" Mhm. So of course I'm feeling a little crushed inside because I'm like, oh snap, this is what Bell Hooks is saying in the book. So I went through the different things, like, do you think I trust you? No, you don't trust me because you'll even when I do stuff, you're still thinking I didn't do it. And I'm like, okay. So it gave me even though the biggest then because I asked him the questions and I was like, oh, and he was like, why are you asking me these questions? I was like, I explained that I got it from the book and whether it was affect or love. And he was like, wait a minute, are you saying that you don't love me? You know? And so I was like, nah, like I'm saying I gotta do better.
Yeah.
I have to do better. And I've been very intentional with that that piece around how I parent because I want my children to be free. I just want them to be free and emotionally free because it's the emotion that keeps us in this rut. And it's not about like don't be emotional like that bullshit. It's like being able to be with the emotion, but my children know that whatever they're feeling, I mean, I have my moments where I'm also, you know, inundated and at capacity, overwhelmed. Yet, for the most part, what they understand is that I can be there with them with their emotion and that they are not responsible for my emotion. So that is something that is very intentional because everything around me, when I think about the things that made me feel horrible about myself, the things that made me feel like I didn't matter, the things that brought about low self-esteem and low self-value had to do with how people didn't give me that space to be. Stop crying, like everything was just kind of like a problem. Like everything was just a problem. There wasn't enough softness. Everything was so rigid. And I promise you, people will say, "Yo, ET, your stuff wasn't as tough as mine." I know people that had it like way stricter, way harder. And that same thing, being in this familial obligation and societal obligation to be like, I'm giving up all of myself for the benefit of what my parents want me to do, of what my family wants me to do.
Yeah.
I think that it's valuable to explore like those ways that we are enmeshed
Hmm.
and to consider beyond just your family. What does society say is okay?
Thank you. I think the way you describe that is like invisible handcuffs, right? And what I hear there is you did stop, you did ask the questions. Again, you're working on yourself and you're collaborating with your children so that you can show up for them in the ways that they need. You're tailoring your approach to them and you're really setting yourself aside. I mean, I know you practice self-care, you go to your friends when you need things like that, and you take breaks and you are able to adjust your schedule sometimes to flex things so that you're good for them. And that's going to pay dividends, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Hmm.
Yes, I think it's so deeply trenched into society, this theme of enmeshment. It's like a set of invisible handcuffs that can keep us tied. I think the guilt is a really big thing. Guilt has stopped me from doing a lot of things too. I wanted to go away further for college, and guilt is what kept me from doing that. I can't. I needed to take care of my parents. Like I could take care of my parents as like a 17-year-old, right? But that's what it was, right? It's just like I just felt tied to that. So it happens. I think in terms of how we can protect ourselves and protect other people against this, I think that I'll say like this is relevant to everybody. If you're a child, which I mean y'all are of someone, we're an offspring of someone, it's relevant, right? Because then you can help trace back what are your patterns and you can work through those patterns. If you're someone who's dating, I think it's important to use your discernment, right? And like look for signs of enmeshment and different things like that. There's quizzes out there that you could take to see your levels of enmeshment as well. Because it just does turn into a bigger problem, honestly. I mean, when he's married to mom, it sounds like a silly title. I think it's laughable and silly, but like, I mean, I've been in that situation too. I've been married to someone who was like that very much. And it's sad, right? And I can see that my dad was very much like that too. Um, so some things that we could do to be healthier, I think like I had a little page here. Yeah. Um, having the different generations be separate, right? The parents are here and they have their own boundaries and they discuss adult problems with other adults, right? Not so much with the kids. And then the kids have their own problems and they can discuss a lot of things with themselves. They go to their parents for help whenever they need to, that kind of thing. And as a parent, like say if you have grandchildren, like doing your best to not overstep, asking for permission. I think a fail-safe can be just asking for permission. Permission. In Ethiopia, is it okay if I? Ethiopia, can we? Ethiopia, this is happening. What can we do about it? Ethiopia, like help me problem solve this thing. Just asking questions and being a little bit more open and more vulnerable. It is tricky, right? But it is possible. And even in the workplace. And like one thing that I enjoyed about this training is he talks a lot about like if one person shifts in the system, everybody else does. And us as social workers, we talk a lot about systems. And again, it's like a cog within a watch. If you shift, it forces everything else to shift as well. Doesn't mean it's pretty, doesn't mean that it's easy, but it is doable and it is possible. Mm, we want to create heart-centered spaces and just safe spaces to be able to be open and honest with other people. Anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, you mentioned the setting of boundaries because that's the asking for permission. I think that that is one of the main things, and I feel like it becomes one of the most difficult things to do. I mean, just culturally, but tying it back to enmeshment, like it's a difficult thing to do when you've had no autonomy.
Absolutely.
Yet that part is important because when you are able to set boundaries, you're telling yourself, I matter. What I want matters. What I
Absolutely.
want matters. And yeah, and I love how that like within that context of consent because consent is boundaries. Yep.
Yeah. And the boundaries and the consent and the compromise, it all provides space for synergy. Again, it doesn't mean that other people are going to meet you where you are. The right people will, aligned people will. And then there's grief that goes along with that too. These people couldn't come along with me. My family couldn't come along with me, or I lost friends because they weren't willing to grow or they didn't want to step into this vulnerability with me. It is sad and it can be absolutely devastating. And also, what do you want for your life? Or which ways are you going to grow and different things like that? I started to learn about boundaries. I don't know why. I don't know if I had like a random professor like give a lecture or what, but like probably 26 years. Sorry, can't do math. Definitely like 20 years ago. Yeah, sure. Like 20-ish years ago is when I started to learn about boundaries. And then like when I was in college, we started talking a little bit more about it for whatever reason again. And I was like, Shh, I'm gonna try it. Worst case, it doesn't work, but this sounds like a solution to me. And I did, and I tried it out with my family, and it was really hard. And I was even more ostracized than I already was for speaking truth. But it's like, okay, but for me, it was spiritual. Like I had this guidance to be able to address it. And it was hard. And I did lose it. And I did have to go through periods of time where I had to like cut everybody off in my family or cut certain people off, stop talking to my parents, like, and we made up, but it's just like it just had to happen. Um, and then like for me, I didn't have a lot of that literature around boundaries. We didn't have influencers and all this social media and things like that. So I just started researching what is a boundary? It's a separation between one thing and or person and another. Okay. Well, how do you set them? What are examples of boundaries and different things like that and going down the rabbit hole. So like looking into YouTube, looking into Google and different things like that and just practicing it out and just seeing how my environment would respond to my behavioral shifts, right? So those are some suggestions, some ideas that you could incorporate as you do that. Again, looking at enmeshment. Dr. Adams does have an excellent YouTube channel, actually. I don't know the name exactly. And like if you Google Dr. Adams, Dr. Kenneth Adams, apparently there's this other one that has a completely different discipline. So like if you were to just Google or look into YouTube, just Dr. Kenneth Adams enmeshment, then you could find a lot of his videos. But I think they're gems. They're simple and sweet. He has a lot of shorts and he also has longer videos and they're pretty excellent. A lot of information, pretty dense, but very applicable. And the way that he talks to you too, he like hits you with the truth. And it's like, okay, well, you
That's
know?
what I love. I love.
Yeah.
Just give me the truth. You know what I'm saying? Just give me the truth. I do have Sagittarius. I have strong Sag energy.
Mm,
So like the whole thing around truth, like I'm, knowing that I'm a Sag, it's like, yeah, it aligns because I'm like, I like when folks are truthful.
yeah,
And sometimes, yeah, we might not be rewarded for telling the truth, right? I remember setting boundaries with my children, and my children did not have to give people hugs. And I had to interrupt and be like, listen, like when you say, hey, come give me a hug, you have to ask them actually if they want a hug. And it was uncomfortable because what's supposed to happen, what usually happens is they say, hey, come and give me a hug, and the child comes and gets a hug. And I'm like, yo, we're not doing that. So it was uncomfortable. And yet setting that boundary of consent, it changed the game on how people had to interact with my children and how they had to interact with me. You cannot come over here playing in my face, not me or my children.
exactly.
And so I think that that piece is, and there was something else that you said that I loved how you said it. Oh man, it's escaping me now. But I do appreciate the what you gave people to do, how they can do it, like how do you take first steps? And I too, I had to, like when Henry died, I like literally it was just like people came out of the woodwork to play in my face. And I was just like, holy smoke, y'all know I'm like grieving, I'm devastated, I'm still in shock. And it came out like it came out so heavy. And I was like, what? And I was like, right, okay. And then I had to just tell people, like, I'm not messing with you. I'm not messing with you. I can't mess with you. I can't mess with you. And now I'm in this place of starting to have enough space. My amygdala is giving me enough space in my social interactions that I can interact with people in a way where I feel safer because I didn't feel safe with anyone. If I didn't set that boundary, though, I would have made myself, I would have been even more afraid, more terrified because I would be in situations where I didn't feel safe. So that guilt piece is a very important piece, true. I know so many people that are moving from guilt with their parents and uh it's a mess. However, yeah, like you said, it's possible. It's possible to heal. It's possible to be emotionally free. And not only is it impossible, like it's imperative.
Yeah.
Wait, I said it is possible. Not only is it possible, it's imperative.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Thank you. Any final thoughts?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay. That sounds good to me. Yeah, there's a lot of gems in there. I know that the way that we flow sometimes, we're fast thinkers, you know? we're quick on our feet, so it is a lot of content. It is really dense. I don't know if you catch that. It is very dense, actually. But we do our best to bring it in a way that it's digestible for you so you can apply it to yourself. But thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.